Well, hello there. How
Hey,
are you?
PJ, good. How you doing, man?
I'm good, dude. Love the hat. What is the hat?
So this is just the Kodiak. So this is my I guess this is what everyone knows me as because I'm always wearing the Kodiak hat. So just rocking my own brand, you know?
It's you. I don't know anything about. Oh wait, I'm wearing a hat that has my brand on it. Okay. Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, man. Super excited for everyone to learn about you, know your story. Your story is fascinating. And it's always a lot of fun to have someone who is so kind and so nice and uh, you know, just a real level head on your shoulders and just a very human person. It's always nice to see someone like yourself do well. And I want to share with everyone what you did to do that and how you got to be where you are and how it hasn't, as far as I can tell. I mean, I didn't know you when you were young, but as far as I can tell, you're still the same guy. So I love that.
Thanks, PJ. Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, I think when we have to figure stuff out, right, it creates quite the character, right? And so I think that that plays a lot into, the person I am today, right? Is I realized that everything that we've acquired, like we had to work for it. And so like so as hard as we've worked, it can all be gone tomorrow too. We were talking about that earlier. So it's
Mm.
important to me to like just stay the same, right? Don't try to be anybody I'm not. Just show up the same every day. So it's something that I think about a lot, and I think that that's been something that's helped me out a lot too, because
Oh,
people, I think people can see genuine out. Is it genuality, whatever the word is, right? People can obviously authenticity. I guess we
yes.
just said right. So I appreciate you saying that.
No, of course. I mean, you meet a lot of people. You've met a lot of people. I've met a lot of people, and you and I have kind of, our circles have overlapped a little bit in the Venn diagram of life. But you see a lot of people who are, you can just tell immediately. Oh, you know, that's more a performance than who they actually are, and other people are just, you get what you get, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you fall in the, you get what you see kind of camp. I am the same way. So that's what I love about it. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to do our famous introduction of you so that everyone knows who the heck we're talking to. And then we'll get going. Is that cool?
Awesome.
All right, folks. Everyone, very, very excited to have Mr. Cody Grandadam on today. So, Cody's story is one of extraordinary transformation, resilience, and courage. Fancy that being on this podcast. From a young age, Cody learned the value of entrepreneurship in the most practical way possible. It all began for him in the fifth grade when he asked his father for a pair of Jordans. That would be the Jordan sneakers. Very cool. You can already tell Cody's hip. Instead of handing over the cash, his father offered him a mower, teaching Cody a lesson in asset creation and cash flow. This early venture into lawn care not only funded his sneaker dreams, but also laid the groundwork for his understanding of business leverage, a concept that would be a cornerstone of his career. Breaking free from the constraints of a typical job, Cody's journey took a significant turn when he founded Promier Products. Known affectionately as the flashlight guy, Cody's company specializes in portable lighting solutions with brands like LitezAll, Kodiak, Illumibrite, and Handsfree. But the path was far from smooth. 3 years into this business, a trusted vendor in China trademarked the Premier name, costing Cody $250,000 and forcing a complete rebrand. This setback, along with the logistical nightmare of manually labeling products due to a missing made in China mark, which is very important, by the way, tested his resolve. Yet these challenges only fueled his determination, embodying the entrepreneurial spirit of learning from mistakes and never repeating them. Today, Cody stands as a beacon of perseverance in the business world. His story is not just about the success of Premier Products, but also about the personal milestones that have shaped him. Happily married for nearly 20 years and a father of two, Cody's life took an unexpected turn when he and his high school sweetheart became parents at 18. This early responsibility instilled in him a profound understanding of endurance and the importance of pushing through life's hurdles. As Cody continues to innovate the lighting industry, his message to follow entrepreneurs is clear: keep going, realize these setbacks and challenges are going to be your catalyst. And his personal mantra, do something today that your future self is going to thank you for, resonates with anyone striving to build something meaningful. Cody Grandadam, we are so thrilled to have you on the Braving Business Podcast.
I like that. That was pretty good. Do we have time to hear it again?
My God, I need more coffee, but sure.
That was excellent.
Well, so let's start in the very beginning. So, how did it all start for you with your journey into entrepreneurship? You know, this pivotal moment. You're in fifth grade, and all of a sudden you're an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so growing up, and I think this is a story that's common amongst a lot of entrepreneurs. Like you didn't have money, right? We were broke, we were poor. We were never poor, but like we didn't have the extra things, right? And so for my dad to go out and buy me a new pair of Jordans, that was a little out of the ordinary, right? But like I wanted them. And so the short of it is he just didn't want to buy the Jordans. And he thought if he made me this offer, like, hey, I'll buy you a mower, cut our grass, you can use it for anybody else. I'm pretty sure he thought I was gonna be like, no, Dad, I'm not gonna do that. But I said, okay, I'll do it. And so he bought me the mower, mowed his grass, cut his grass. And then I went out and got 5 or 6 other lawns in the neighborhood. And so I was in the fifth grade. Some guys were paying me $10, some were $20 and so forth. But I think I was making about $150 a week in the
Mm.
fifth grade, right? And like that's like pretty dang good. But the problem with that was I realized early on, you were talking about leverage. Like if I didn't go out and cut these grasses, I didn't get paid. Right. And
Mm.
so I did the math, and my sister was 3 years older than me. So she was in the eighth grade or her freshman year in high school. And back then, minimum wage was like $7 or $8. I'm like, man, I'll pay my sister 10, let her go cut the grasses. She can get them done in a couple of hours and I'll just keep the difference. Right. And so that's when I really learned like that leverage, right? Like you can have a great business, but if you don't have leverage, you just have a high paying job. Right. And so I don't think that was the lesson I was supposed to learn at the fifth grade. And it probably wasn't until years later where it all came into correlation. It just happened out of necessity. Right. But that's really where like that entrepreneurial journey started. Is
Sure. Well,
back
and
then.
necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if you're sitting there, first of all, kudos to you. You know, when I was in fifth grade, I don't think I would have had the wherewithal or the I don't know, the temetry to be able to sit there and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to hire some other people within the family to go do this other work for me, pay them a good wage, but then I'm going to scale, right? Because that's basically what you did. You scaled, and um, you did it in a very basic but awesome way, and you got it done. So after that, like, where did it go? Like obviously this got the juices going on the entrepreneurial side. You've gotten a taste of it. Now you like it. Like, what happened with that? Where did it go?
So I kept doing the lawn mowing business. I think I did it probably until I was a sophomore when I could drive, and then different priorities happened, right? But
Mm.
what happened from there was, I did the lawn mowing, got my sister involved. I ended up getting a buddy involved as well, and then we started doing hedges and all different things like that. And I got like a paper route and different things. So I was running like multiple little tiny businesses, right? I was buying and selling things as well. Because remember, I'm making $150 in the fifth grade, so like I would always find things to flip, right? And so that was kind of the journey, I think, until my sophomore year. Got my driver's license, kind of put everything on the back burner, right? I wanted to have fun, be the class clown, make everybody laugh. And it wasn't really until I graduated, right? And, during our graduation, my wife was actually 8 weeks pregnant. And so we didn't, nobody knew it, of course, but we knew it. My father knew it and so forth. And I really did not have a plan up until that point. Like I wasn't planning on going to college. I was always like delusionally optimistic, right? Like I'll just figure things out. And so it wasn't until that point where I was like, man, I really need to do something, right? And so I think at that age was when I was like, okay, what should I do? Well, I always wanted to be the entrepreneur, but like I need something right now, right? And so it took a little bit of time after that, but I think that's when those juices started flowing again. Was that like 18, 19 years old? But I didn't start my first business at that point. I went out and got a job, right? So yeah, I think that all of those things accumulated and got the mind working a little differently. But I didn't hit that wall yet where I was like, I need these Jordans. I got to go out and cut the grass, right? So there was no like real defining thing like you got to go out and start your own business, right? And so the low hanging fruit was go find a job, right? But I think that's when it was starting to like connect. Like I've got to do something different.
When so what? if you don't mind me asking, what job did you get? Like when you're first looking at, okay, I'm gonna, I'm out of high school. I got some responsibilities. I have my young wife, but I also have a child on the way. Like what were you looking for? What was in your mind at that point?
Yeah. So the one thing I liked about the entrepreneurship was like the time freedom. Well, I guess it's the illusion of time freedom, right? Because as a business owner, like you're probably busier than you've ever been, right? But the illusion of it to be able to dictate your time. And so I always thought like sales would be where it's at, right? I felt like when you're a salesperson, you're owning your book of business and you're kind of like managing that. And I've always said to myself, like salespeople are king. So if you're the best at the sales in your company, you can kind of, pull the strings a little bit. And so I was always looking for at 18, 19, like what's the best sales job I could get. Right. And so that's what I started in. It was advertising sales. I remember it was $9 an hour to start out, but it was 20% commission. I got to work at a desk, 19 years old. I'm like, man, I made it. Right. And I literally just called on high schools and sold little sports booklets, right, with advertisers in there. And so that was my first job. And what's great about that first job was obviously no experience, but again, I'm on the phone picking it up, cold calling hundreds of businesses a day, and so like never made a ton of money at that job, but that is really what really projected me to do what I'm doing today, which is I'm calling on huge retailers like Walmart. And so I always tell people like, no matter what job you're doing, like go all in, do as best as you can because you never know what those skill sets are going to carry later, right? And so that was my first sales job, selling advertising just over the phone.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. Somewhat of a similar track. I don't have a green thumb though, so if I cut the lawn, it was going to die. Uh, but I early on I had a job in a call center, right? Like not really a call center, but it was a selling over the phone job. And we had to call, I think the minimum was 120 calls a day. And that was 120 calls of like actually connecting with people.
Mhm.
So it as obviously that number was really large, but I'm mentioning that because I think in today's standards, we see a lot of like sequences and we see a lot of automation and we see a lot of AI and we see a lot of like, oh, let's make the sales job easier. And for any entrepreneurs who are just starting out or thinking about automation, thinking about sequences, those are all great. But for me personally, and Cody, you can let me know if I'm wrong in this track or not, but I feel that everyone's a salesperson and everyone absolutely should be talking on the phone with people because it's not about it's harder to do or that it's not as rewarding. I think there's so much innate emotional intelligence that you can grow from that and just understanding how to build relationships because at the end of the day, if you're not building relationships then you're only transactional and then you are going to be falling prey to every competitor you have out there. The biggest thing that you can have in your back pocket are the relationships that you build. So I think that you doing this kind of advertising job, you being forced at 19 to sit at a desk, not forced, but at 19 sitting at a desk and just hammering out these calls, I think in you probably instilled a true appreciation of that relationship building process. Am I correct in that?
100%. I think about it even today, like why do we buy certain products, right? And we'll probably talk about this a lot later on in the call on the podcast here, but like when we think about like why we buy things, there's certain things we buy because we just need them, right? But if it comes to a point where A has it and B has it, and they're both the same, we're gonna buy off the person we like more, right? And so like today, we're calling on major retailers, Walmart's, True Values, Home Depots of the world. And it's crazy to me because I actually was having a conversation with one of the buyers a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Man, you must be like inundated with calls and emails, right?" And he said, "No, no one calls us. We don't get cold calls anymore. Like no one cold calls." And that's the only way I got into all of these accounts, right? And so people ask me today, like, "How did you get into Walmart? How did you get into blah blah blah?" And I'm always like, "Well, I think I just got lucky." No, I picked up the phone and made a phone call, right? And so my whole thing is in sales, like people are buying time, they're buying convenience, right? But when it comes down to it's that relationship because people can equally give their time. They can equally figure out how to make things more convenient, but not everyone can develop that relationship the same. Right. And so that's always my goal is if I'm working with somebody, whether it's someone I'm talking to on Instagram, like yourself, PJ, someone that I'm on a podcast, whatever it is, I'm trying to say, how can I develop a relationship and actually save that person time, energy, and money, but do so as, a friend. Right. And
Yep.
so we all want to work with our friends. So you're absolutely right. Everybody's a salesperson, whether you're a teacher, a mom, a dad, whether you're doing it, for a living, we're all selling somebody something. And that's building that relationship, right? We have to sell
So true.
ourselves.
No, absolutely. You have to sell yourself. And also, I think that sales, just in general, the connotation of sales has a negative connotation, right? People are like, oh, this is a sales guy, right? There are salespeople, and then there are people who just spread the word, like,
Mhm.
evangelist or whatever. But there are ways to approach it. I tell everyone is a salesperson. Everyone is, doesn't matter how shy you are, or I'm an introvert versus an extrovert, whatever. Everyone's a salesperson, because I guarantee you, if you saw something really great on TV last night, or you went and saw an amazing show, or you checked out a new restaurant and it was fabulous, you're going to go and tell your friends, and you're going to share that. And that, in a way, is sales, right?
Mhm.
That is you just wanting to share something good with other people. And so with people on my team, my sales force, and whatnot, I've always told them, like, when you're talking with customers, it's not about, I got the best product for you. It's about learning what they need and then
Yeah.
matching that need, right? And doing it in sincerity. There's two things you got to be in sales. You got to be sincere, and you got to be curious, because without those two things, you're not going to build relationships. And I think those are, at least for me, those are two major things.
Yeah. I think, when it comes to being sincere and curious, right? The curiosity that makes you ask the questions, right?
Mhm.
But, even I hear it from sometimes my sales guys too, like they feel like, oh, I don't want to be like that sales guy. Right. And we have to think a completely different way. If our neighbor was sick, right, with something, and we had the cure for what they needed, would we be apprehensive about going over there, knocking on their door and sharing it with them?
Nope.
Right. And if we truly cared about them, would we be worried what they thought of us? Like we know we have the cure. And so, when you're working with a company and you're selling a product, that's why it's so, so important to truly believe that you have the best option out there. Because once you understand that, then you realize, like, hey, I'm not calling Walmart to sell them some other product. I'm calling them because their job is to find great products to offer them to their customers, and they need me just as much as I need them. So we're doing a service by reaching out to them and calling them, right? And so, but in order to figure out if that's actually a true statement, we have to be curious. We have to ask the questions. We have to find out what challenges they're having, what hiccups are they having, what are their goals, where do they want to go, right?
Absolutely.
So that's really how I approach sales. It's like, okay, I can sell you this, I have this pen in my hand, but you've heard Jordan Belfort, like, you got to first figure out, do they need the pen? Right.
Right.
If they don't need a pen, don't sell them a pen. And so at the end of the day, it's just about sincerely offering them a solution to their problems. And if if your product solves those problems, there should be no apprehensiveness about making a cold call or knocking on a door, because you're just giving them a solution that they're literally looking for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think that one of the things I appreciate about you, and so, even in the short stories that you've shared so far, is that you're clearly a tactician. And what I mean by that is you're able to take a step back and be able to, see the whole forest and not just the tree in front of you. So the fact that at five, or in fifth grade, you're able to sit there and say, hey, you know what? If I get my sister to do this, she can help out, and I'm going to give her some, extra pay, so that it's good for her, it's good for me, it's good for the clients. Like, taking a step back and being able to assess everything really well, I think is a key hallmark of why you've been successful. So if you wouldn't mind, I know you've shared this with me in the past, but share with our audience, like, what about your biggest sale into Walmart? How did you get from being a competitor to Coleman and to well, I guess it's like Eveready and whoever else is out there on the lighting side of things. How did you take your, your one man show basically, and actually compete against these large brands in a place like Walmart?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that about the technician part, right? And so I think the one thing that I do well, or that I think I've come to be able to do better, is being self aware and just really identifying like all different perspectives and all different things. And now I can tell that story about the lawn mowing service, and it comes full circle, right? But often, most times in my entrepreneurial journey, I'm going to be honest, PJ, I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. And so a lot of times I just act based upon like how I feel. Right. And now when you look 10 years down the road, you say to yourself, that's exactly why that happened. I did this, 1 + 1 = 2. But at the time, you're like multiplying, dividing, all that stuff. And so when I look at the flashlight company itself, now it's very clear to see why Walmart picked us up, right? Why are we in these big retail chains? But at the time, to be honest, PJ, it came down to we were the best cost, right? And so when I called Walmart, completely got lucky. The buyer answered the phone, and never talked to this buyer before in my entire life. He just answered the phone. He was a younger guy, and I was so jacked up and so excited that the Walmart buyer answered that I was just like spewing on him, right? And we had a product that was a very good selling product at the time. It was a little light switch, a wireless light switch, and it looked just like your light switch on the wall. And you flipped it on, there's two LEDs on the side. And I'm telling you, PJ, we could not keep these in stock. We were flying them in. So I got the Walmart buyer on the phone. I'm telling him, hey, have you seen this? And he never did. I'm like, man, how could you not? It's at every retail store and the blah, 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 blah. And he says, well, I'm finishing up my mod right now, which is the planogram. And I've got one spot left that's 4 inches wide by 5 inches deep. If you can fit that space, we might have an opportunity. So I sent him that sample, and I sent him 3 other samples in the box, and ended up buying all 4 items for the Walmart mod. First time I've ever even talked to him. And so I would say that, well, I got lucky, right? But it wasn't like I was calling on Walmart. But the point of the matter is we had a product that he instantly resonated on, right? Something that he instantly saw. And his problem was he's got this 8-foot planogram, and every single square inch needs to make money. And he needed to fill that spot, and we were able to fill that spot. And so that was just a matter of being at the right place at the right time. And I always say, like, where activity goes, success flows, right? And so I was doing the activity, and then it just all happened, right? But you're probably wondering, or you're probably asking that question more to see, like, how did we take it from, just a flashlight in Alibaba to, a professional lighting company? But that's how we got into Walmart. Just made a phone call.
Oh, that's awesome. And then, but then also, yeah. So there's the second part of that question, or the further along in the story of where you actually convinced the people. At least, was it a local store, or was it
Yeah, yeah.
national?
For like when I first started selling the flashlights.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I worked for a company before I owned my company, and it was an import company. And that business, it was a startup company, and they had an ad out in the newspaper, marketing manager, $60,000 a year. This was 15 years ago. No, longer, 17 years ago. I applied, they didn't hire me. I called again and again. Finally, the guy's like, come in, I'll give you an interview, right? Because he was like, I'm done talking to this guy. So I came in, I interviewed, and he says, hey, I can't hire you for the marketing position. You have no experience. And remember, I'm like 19 years old, 20 years old. He goes, but I've got this battery company that I started, and I'm looking for a sales guy. I'm like, what does that entail? He's like, you just load up. I'll give you a van, load it up, and just go to local stores and try to sell them batteries out of the back of the van. And so that's where I got that start at, right? So I'd walk into a convenience store, shake hands, develop a relationship. Hey, I've got these batteries, right? Would you like to buy them? And I did that for about 60 days, and I opened up about 60 new accounts. I did, I think, $6,000 in sales. And my boss was super ecstatic, excited. But at the end of the day, I knew, like, okay, if I sold $6,000 worth, even if he makes 50 points, that's $3,000 over 2 months. Like, how am I going to make any money, right? The company has to be profitable. And my dad, I'll never forget this. He says, Cody, you're walking into someone that owns one convenience store. Why don't you call someone that owns 100? And I'm like, oh, I never thought about that, right? I said, well, who would I call? And he goes, well, I'm always seeing these gas stations called Come and Go on the side of the road. Why
Mhm.
don't you try them? And so I went on the internet, found the buyer. His name was Dana, made a phone call. It turns out they own 435 stores. Got an appointment with him, met with him in person, and he ended up buying a counter display of batteries, double A's and triple A's for every store. It was an $80,000 order. And that's when I was like, man, I've been working for 60 days, opened up 60 accounts, did 6,000. I called one guy, sold one person, $80,000 order. And that's when that flipped. That's when I'm like, okay, I need to focus on really volume, right? Working with the big chains. And so the good thing about that is, you talked about like, how did we get from there to here? Well, when you're working with these big chains, you have to worry about what does your packaging look like? How are you displaying the product, right? And so that 435 store chain really helped me to like, okay, we need to put this in a packaging, we need to put it in a card, not just throw it in a display, right? And so that was pretty early on. And so I did that at that company for about 4 years. And the one thing that I realized is batteries is not something you can innovate, right? A double A battery is a double A battery. You're only going to sell them based upon like how good the person likes you and whoever has the best price. And so, anyways, I was developing this relationship with Dana, becoming friends. And I felt like he would buy anything from me as long as it was a value. But the problem is he can't buy more batteries. They've already got them in the stores. And so I said, Dana, what else do you buy? Oil, glue, whatever it was. And he said, flashlights. I said, interesting. I think I can buy flashlights. So I went on Alibaba.com, found a flashlight supplier, and I ended up selling Dana flashlights too. And I noticed with the flashlights, they were turning so much quicker, right? And so I'm like, man, we need to start selling flashlights. So, anyways, started importing flashlights for that company. Sales went from zero, my personal sales, to $4 million in just 3 years.
Holy mackerel.
But at the end of the day, I wasn't very happy. My pay didn't go up with me. I was young as well. And me and the boss kind of got into a little spiff, and I ended up leaving that business. Got let go, actually, filed unemployment, really had no idea what I was going to do. And that was right at the time where I'm like, okay, I'm going to start my own flashlight company. And so, at that other business, I pretty much developed all the systems then, right? Because again, it was a startup company, so they didn't have sales training, they didn't have protocols, SOPs, right? And so I was almost that was almost my own company there, but I was just a sales guy. And so, like I said, I left that business and then I started my company. Just a couple months after that, actually.
So tell me about that part though, right? Like you get into a spiff, you're arguing with potentially arguing with the owner, you get let go, obviously not for not for work product, right? Like you're clearly kicking tail. Um, but then you got to come home and you got to tell your young wife, and I'm assuming at that point your young child or children,
Yeah.
hey, don't know exactly what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Actually,
That
yeah, that's an interesting story. So the thing is, like, my wife knew I wasn't incredibly happy, right? And so it wasn't like something that just happened overnight. And it came down to, I just felt like I wasn't valued, right? I was told I was valued, but my pay wasn't reflective of such, right? And I'm always the person like, okay, I'll put in the work, right? I don't expect you to pay me more than I'll do more. I'll do more, but I expect to be paid more, right? And so like my wife knew that already. And so like I told you, I'm delusionally optimistic, right? I always think things are going to work out. And so when I came home that day, it was nothing different for my wife, right? She's like, you're going to figure this out. Don't even worry about it. So at the end of the day, I had unemployment as well, right? And so like, and we never made a lot of money either. So like there was no like fear of, okay, what's going to happen now? Are we going to be able to go on? We weren't going on vacations. We weren't doing those things, right? And so she was pretty good about it, right? Very good about it. In my mind, I was like, what am I going to do? But I knew like, I always say today, and I wasn't always this way, but I always say today, like, what is the worst thing that can happen? Like when we worry about something, like, okay, if everything falls apart, what's the worst that can happen? Well, in that situation, I could just go back and work there, right? Remember, I'm doing 4 million a year in sales. And actually, he offered me another position at a much higher pay, but I didn't take it. So, um, to me, I wasn't like freaking out or panicking, right? And my kids were like, I don't think they even knew what was going on at that time, right? And so the wife was supportive of me. She's like, hey, you're going to figure this out. That's how she's always been. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to figure it out. Worst comes to worst, I just go back and do this. Right. And so what happened was, my neighbor, my next door neighbor, which is a business owner, he had a DUI. And so he had a DUI. He wasn't able to drive to work, and he wasn't able to drive to work. So I gave him a ride to work every single day for the past year before leaving that job. And so every single morning he would hear about what's going to be going on that day. And every single night going home, he'd hear about like what happened, the challenges, the sales and all that stuff. So when I told him like, hey, I quit, his first thing was, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to file unemployment. He says, why don't you just start your own flashlight company? And I'm like, well, how? One, I've got no money, nothing, right? He says, don't worry about that. The money will come. I'll help you get started. You can use my little office, right, in my building. You can use my secretary, my emails, and all that good stuff. And let's just get started and rock and roll. And that's what we did. About a month after leaving there, I set up office in his little shop, and we started the flashlight company.
That's awesome. But also, like, first of all, I totally appreciate your mindset about what's the worst that can happen, right? Because there have been many times where, either personally or professionally, you run into these walls and you run into these situations, and some of them are just terrible, right? Loss of a loved one or whatever. Like, many things happen in life, and some of them are fantastic and some of them are terrible. And when you're faced with the terrible stuff, especially in those really bad times, I've always kind of been like, well, what are you going to do? Die? Like,
Yeah.
got to keep going, right? Like, yes, it's terrible. Let's see that it's terrible and appreciate it and recognize it as being terrible. Got it. It's terrible. Now we're going to put that to the side because we got stuff we got to do, right? We got to keep moving forward. Dinner's still coming at 5, it's going to be expected at 5, and tomorrow the sun's going to come up hopefully. And so, like, you just got to keep putting that one foot in front of the other and not get deterred. And that kind of like is behind the pivot as well, right? So you made a pivot in that point. You were a salesperson. You're, obviously wildly successful in this venture. You're able to see tactically, you're able to see, hey, batteries, there's a ceiling on that. What else can we do? Oh, here's a much larger platform to go on, lighting and all that kind of stuff. So tell us about like launching Promier, and also about this terrible situation that happened with your vendor overseas and the trademark. Like,
Yeah.
tell us about that.
Yeah. So, when I launched my company, it's Promier Products, right? And my thought process was this, right? Same thing with Dana at Come and Go. Like, I'm developing these relationships, right? One of my first customers at my company was True Value, right? 5,000 stores. The buyer and I had a very good relationship. Mary, she had a son that was my age, right? And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to sell Mary flashlights, but because I've developed this relationship, I bet she'll buy anything off me that she buys. But I realized very, very quickly that it's not always good to be the jack of all trades, right? And the master of none, especially when you're developing a company. And so I said, you know what? I need to be a flashlight expert. I want Mary, if she has a question about flashlights, to come to me. Just like if you need a brain surgery, you're going to go to a brain doctor, right? You're not going to go to a family practice that does everything under the sun. And so I said, I'm going to focus just on lighting, right? And so at the time, I owned the trademark Promier for my company. So I said, you know what? We're going to put everything under Promier, Promier, the flashlights, the batteries. Went out, filed my trademarks, right? And flashlights, batteries, all that good stuff. And started bringing product in, right? Sold to True Value. We got Menards shortly after that. Then we got Big Lots. We started selling to Walmart even. And it was one day I got an email from my broker, my custom broker, and he says, "Hey, your containers are being held right now at port. Can you send me your Chinese trademark authorization?" So I sent him my USA trademark authorization. He says, "You don't own the trademark in China?" I said, "No, I don't sell anything in China. Why would I need the trademark in China?" He's like, "Well, someone else trademarked your name in China and they're now seizing your containers." I'm like, how can that be possible? Like, it's my name. It's a made up name, Promier, Promier.
Yeah.
Well, they did, right? And the most disheartening part of that, it was my very own supplier, right? And so this supplier we were doing business with, and we kind of slowed down doing business because we found better alternatives. And he's like, this is how I'm going to get his business back. So he seized my containers. I ended up hiring an attorney, paid him about $250,000. And I finally figured out, like, you know what, this is not going to go anywhere. And that's because I read a story about Apple, how Apple has to pay literally a licensing of some sort for trademarks in China because the same thing happened to them for one of their products, right? And I said to myself, and if Apple didn't get it back, what makes me think I'm going to get it back? And so I was like, I need to switch gears, right? And now remember, at this time, we probably have already done 20 million in sales, at least under the Promier brand. And so I'm like, I need to think of a name now. So we thought of it. We got a new name, and which is actually a really cool story too, how that came about. But yeah, we just pivoted, right? So that's when we came up with LitezAll. And a little few years later, we came up with Kodiak. But yeah, LitezAll was the brand at that point. So we had to tell all the customers, we're switching brands. This is going to be better. It's going to resonate better, which it does. And that's what we did. So yeah, it was a little bit of a nightmare. But today, like, that was something that was super pivotal. Like,
Sure.
Promier doesn't really resonate with LitezAll does, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that was a great thing.
Well, and also, yeah, I understand the desire and the ease of using something like Premiere, because then it allows you to go, you know, hey, if I want to get into this product, or I want to get into that product, it's easy for me to go, right? If you're lights all, you're just lights, or not. That's what people are expecting, right? And
Yeah,
it's hard to sell coffee mugs under lights all, but Premiere, you can do everything, right? I totally get that. But um, tell me, so, and I also though very much appreciate the fact that you're like, you know what? I got to be the expert, right? If I'm going to sell at volume, people need to trust that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not just a middle guy. Like I actually know my stuff, which 1,000%, I fully appreciate that, and believe that every entrepreneur needs to be the master of what they're doing, obviously, right? What you mentioned that lights all the story of the name, like, had
yeah.
some interesting connotation. Share that with us, please.
Yeah, so at the time I'm like, what am I going to name this company? And so Premier came about because we just made it up, right? It's for professional and Premier. We wanted to be the professional company. We want to be the first source. And so, anyways, I was at Home Depot with my buddy Jimmy, and we're walking the aisles. And at the time, I'm in this litigation still, talking about things. And I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I know we need to change our name. We got to figure this out. And I'm at Home Depot. I'm checking out. And at the register, they had a bucket of markers, and it was Milwaukee's product. And it said Inksall, Inkzall. And I thought to myself, man, that's kind of cool because Milwaukee owns Sawzall, right? So I'm like, I wonder if LitezAll's available. Like, I wonder if someone's got that as a trademark. And so I went on the USPTO.gov, looked it up, didn't exist. There was no LitezAll, there was no LitezAll, nothing. So I'm like, I'm going to try to file a trademark on this, not thinking I was going to get it, but we got it, right? And so the name literally came about by just being perspicarious. I love that word, by the way. It's a big one of my only big words I know. Just by looking around and seeing what's out there, and then just changing it a little bit to fit our style, right? So LitezAll is what we ran with, and today that's the brand we that's one of the brands that we carry.
Um, the meaning behind that big word you just used, perspicacious.
Perspicarious. So
Curious.
from what I've heard, it's just literally just being observant, looking around, and taking in what you're seeing, right? And so if you're at a Starbucks and the line's super long and everyone's rude and obnoxious, well, if you own a business, and that's one way to compete with Starbucks, make sure everybody's not rude and obnoxious at your facility, right? So just really just being aware of what's going on around you, and then applying it in your own way.
Love it. Love that. See, I said you were a tactician, but you were just perspicarious, or however you said it. So that's awesome.
I hope that's the right way to say it anyways,
Well,
but
trust me, if you said it the right way, I'm going to say it the wrong way. So don't.
yeah.
Okay. So with your experience in like overcoming these setbacks, what what perspective has it given you? Like, what perspective shift have you experienced about the importance of endurance in entrepreneurship?
So I think like that's really came about in the last probably 2 or 3 years, right? And so I've always felt like, honestly, I've never felt like I'm a great entrepreneur, and that's because I'm always constantly dealing with something, right? And so when you go on social media and you see everybody on there, they got the cars, the businesses, like that's what you see. You don't see all their problems. And so you're comparing yourself to them and you're like, man, I have the cars and these things, but I have all these problems that come with it. So like I feel you're always going to feel like you're never living up to that standard. And so that's how it's always been for me. But recently, like I said, in the past 2 or 3 years, I've realized like problems are not a part of business. They're like the integral foundation of a business, right? And so anybody that's doing anything, there's going to be issues, there's going to be challenges. And what makes a good entrepreneur is just the ability to steer those challenges and issues, right? And so I've come to find out that most people are very successful. They've just had the ability to endure more things and overcome more things, right? And so now it's like when there's a problem in my business, a good example was, just the other day, my buddy's with me and we're talking about our day, and I'm like, I got this going on, I got this going on, and most people would be like, oh man, that sucks, man, blah blah blah. But my buddy literally said, good, and I was like, you know what, you're right, right? Like good, like these are all the things I hoped for, right? Because these problems only come with these are byproducts of like doing big things, right? If I wasn't doing big things, I wouldn't have these big problems. And so that's the perspective today. Like, okay, you're going to have things happening, you're going to have setbacks, especially when you're really motivated to scale and build something big. Because when you're doing those things, you don't have time to wait. You don't have time to like think everything through. It's about making a decision and moving forward. And not all of them are going to be the right decisions, right? And so what you have to do is be able to just acknowledge, like, okay, that didn't work, let's move on, right? And so that's happened more recently where I've realized like I'm not a terrible entrepreneur. I'm just an entrepreneur that's doing a lot of things and things are going to fall apart. That's okay.
Yeah. And you know what? You're so humble. I mean, really, you are. You're just a very humble, self-effacing, very approachable person, which one of the things that I truly love about you. But just so that people understand, you are very successful though, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Can you give us like a snapshot of where LitezAll and Kodiak and all these brands are today, and then where do you want to be in the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah. So today we're between, 60,000, 100,000 retailers, right? Depending on the seasonality. But, we sell to Dollar General, Walmart, True Value, Ace Hardware, we're, like I said, about 100,000 retailers. We have three main brands, LitezAll, Kodiak, and Illumibrite. Illumibrite is basically our very opening price point. You'll see that at Dollar General. LitezAll is like the middle grade, and then Kodiak is the super high quality, right? And so today we've done about $500 million in retail sales. And so where do I see the company going? So like that number sounds big, $500 million, right?
It is big, actually.
That's over 15 years.
Hmm.
You know, a company like Rayovac is doing that in a year, right? Now the difference between me and Rayovac, well, there's a lot, but one is they've got 100 years on me, right? They've been doing this for 100 years. And so, and all of my other competitors, like we're playing in a space that's owned by big dinosaur brands. Like if you walk into a Walmart, you'll see Kodiak. Right next to us, you're going to see Coast, 100-year-old brand. You're going to see Energizer, right? 100-year-old brand. You're going to see Rayovac. You're not going to see other brands like Kodiak that have been around for 12 years. And so those are the areas that we're playing in. And so my goal is to get to the same level that they are at, right? To be doing that 500 million, 200 million, 300 million a year in sales, right? And so in order to do that, I have to take what I've done personally and then duplicate that in scale. And so right now I'm focused very highly on developing systems and procedures and developing a protocol so I can almost clone myself and be able to do this at a much larger scale. Because right now we're kind of limited in my ability. Right now I'm kind of at the peak of where we can be. And so that's the next thing, is to take it from where we are to 300, 400 million a year in sales.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're basically at a saturation point, is what you're saying, right? Like you only have so much time in the day, and although you're very tall, there's only so much ground you can cover. So totally get that. Um, one of the things that I also really appreciate about you in learning in this conversation is that you are a true entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of times where people they they will create a great product or they'll create a great service and they will fall in love with that product or service and they will basically become the embodiment of that. And everything is hooked into that. It is their identity, it's their future, it's their past. It's like some kind of matrix tied in, like, this is who they are. Um you are you're approaching this in reverse. Like, you are like, okay, what's the market? What is something that I know I can leverage and sell and do well with? And then you win all in on that. Um, what is that natural? Is that a learned thing that you had? Like, where do you get this perspective from?
I think it's maybe subconsciously it's natural, right? But again, it all stems from necessity, right? And that's why that's why, like, now, like, more than ever, I don't get as stressed out or anxiety over issues and problems, because every single catalyst in my life has come from a setback, a challenge, or some type of adversity, right? Like, I needed a new pair of Jordans. My dad said no. I got the mower. I started a business. I lost my job, had nothing going on. I started a business, right? Someone stole my trademark. Well, I created LitezAll, catalyst again. And so I think that's been the biggest determining factor, is just realizing that these things happen, and when they do, what's next, right? And so what's great about being an entrepreneur, especially for 10, 15, 20 years, you're it's kind of like water going through, creating canyons and such, right? They're like forging that path, and then you can look behind you, you can see what it's done. It's the same thing as an entrepreneur. Like, when you're constantly going through things, and every time you come out stronger and better, eventually you realize, like, that's just how it is. And so a new entrepreneur doesn't have that experience, right? They can't lean on that perspective, and so they end up just quitting, right? Where if they would have stayed the course, eventually their perspective is going to change, and they're going to realize, like, okay, problems exist, we get through them, and then we move on and get better, right? And so I think it's both. It's a perspective thing, and then it's also a tactful thing, right? As we do things more often, we get better at it, and so we continue to get better at things. Our perspective changes to accept the things we're not getting better at, so to speak, and because we've done it long enough, we're willing to keep going until both of those things are aligned, our perspective and our abilities. And so I think that's what it's been. It's been a combination of both.
Hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Um, and lastly, you are at a point where you have a lot of access to a lot of people, and your name is out there. And again, you're a very humble guy, but you've been on not only the social media markets, but you've also been on the major television markets, and you were on the was it GMA?
Yeah. Yep. Good Morning America, The View, HSN, QVC, all that stuff. The what people used to watch, now they're watching TikTok Shop.
Right, right. Well, actually, tell us a little bit about that. So you've been around long enough to see this shift, right?
Mm.
From traditional TV, traditional ways of getting the word out about your product or your service, traditional advertising venues, but now it's a lot more, not so much guerrilla like, but it's a
Mm.
lot more fragmented. What's your take on that, and what are you how are you playing in that space?
Yeah, so I think I was on a podcast last week or the week before, and we talked about something similar, and how, like, the tides are kind of changing, but that's always happened, right? Retail was big. Everyone's going into retail stores now. They're buying more online. Eventually, it's going to switch again. Like, people are going to want to have that emotion, right? They're going to miss what that was like. And so the biggest thing is, obviously, if you can see things before, it's great. And so I know that we don't have a crystal ball. We cannot see into the future how things are going to be, but there's a certain level of things that are never going to change, right?
Mm.
And so, for example, people want to feel good about making purchases, right? That's not going to change, right? Now, how they make those purchases might change. They want to feel convenienced, right? Like, they're not being inconvenient to buy your product. And so, at the end of the day, those are the things we think about, are like the things that are not going to change. But we know, like, okay, the delivery process of which is going to change. Now they can just go on the internet and buy it from there. And so we're a little behind when it comes to e-commerce. And the reason being is because all of my business has always been in brick and mortar. And so from my perspective was I'm not going to get on the retail side of things online because I don't want to pull business from the ones that are feeding me, right? I don't want to lose sales at Walmart because of Amazon. And so today we have to do both, right? We still need to support those in-store retailers, but we also have to get on Amazon and do all those other things like TikTok because it's not even just about sales, right? Now when someone walks into a Walmart and they see the 5 items on the shelf, well, I just saw that one on TikTok. I just saw that one on blah, blah, blah. And so now what we're doing is we're starting an entire new category of my company. I just hired a new creative director, multimedia. We're going to be starting to do daily lives on TikTok Shop, whatnot, and what have you. And so, for the past 15 years, I haven't invested in that. So now we're gonna continue to keep going and growing in the brick and mortar, but now we're really going to put a big step forward in the online and e-commerce. So you're going to see a big difference in the next 12 months when it comes to Kodiak online. That's going to be a really big push for us. And at the end of the day, it's going to help our retail stores too because they're going to see it online. Not everyone's going to buy it, but when they see it at the Walmart shelf, they're going to be like, "Oh, I remember." Actually, I not only remember that, I remember the guy. He's got that big beard,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which that's why you see a lot. That's why I am this guy, right? Because I want people to know when they buy a Kodiak flashlight, they're buying it from a person, not just another big company, right? And so that's why I'm so focused on my personal brand and the flashlight guy.
That's awesome. I love that. Last quick question. I know that you've got Damon John on speed dial. You've done a lot with the Shark Tank crew, if I'm not mistaken. How did all that come about?
Yeah, really just I followed Damon. I've watched the show pretty much since it's been out. And one time about I don't know 10 years ago, he had an auction and he was going to donate money to this auction company. And basically, it was win a day of fishing with Damon John. And whatever we bid, it went to this nonprofit. And so I ended up bidding. I think it was super cheap. Damon hates me telling the story, but I think it was like 6 or 7 grand. But honestly, at the time, that was a lot of money for my company. But anyways, it was an eBay auction. I set my limit at like $7,001. We were the highest bidder, and so I'm going down to Miami to meet Damon, and it was an all day thing. We met at 10 a.m. Got picked up. We went out on the boat. We went deep sea fishing until like 4 o'clock, and we were just catching fish, filming everything. And I was the whole time I was with Damon, I was like, this is incredible because I literally been watching this guy on TV. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm going to develop a friendship with Damon. This guy is going to be a really good friend of mine one day. And so I never talked about flashlights, right? I never was like, how can we work together? How can we do these things? It was a genuine fishing trip with a buddy. And so at the end of it, he said, "Hey, what do you do? What do you do again?" And I'm like, "I sell flashlights." Now I did have a whole backpack full of flashlights. And so when he said that, I just started bringing them out. Here's one for you, right? So, anyways, we exchanged phone numbers, and now we talk very, very often, right? But that's because I didn't go in there saying, "Okay, I'm going to have a transaction with Damon." It was I'm going to build a relationship, show him value, and obviously it worked. And that to this very day, everybody I meet, I try to do the same thing, right? Let's not make it transactional, right? Let's see how we can develop a friendship, a relationship, and hopefully it might turn into transactional because we want to work with our friends. But if not, you're going to gain a friend out of it, right? And so that was the goal with Damon, and honestly, that's the goal with all the interactions I have.
It's such a healthy way, really. I think personally, I think it's a healthy way of looking at things and how to approach things because um, people smell BS,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And if you're coming in, how do I hook this guy? How do I let get this woman to just buy from me? You're going all about it the wrong way. You really got to be about like this. I'm just trying to do the best that I can, and I just want to create I want to create a relationship that's lasting. And I 1,000% am behind that. That's awesome.
yeah.
So, we're coming up to our time. Yeah, how do people find you? How do people, not only your social media, but also LitezAll and Kodiak? Like,
Yep.
tell us where to go.
So I'm most active on Instagram, and my Instagram is just Cody Grandadam, CodyGrandadam. And then on Instagram and TikTok, our flashlight handles are LitezAll, LitezAll.
That is amazing. Do you guys do anything with lasers?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, a lot of our new, actually, a lot of our new handheld everyday carries have built-in lasers too.
Um, I'm very interested in that. And the only reason why, and I'll tell you this really quickly, the where I live, we back up to a forest preserve that thankfully the forest preserve takes care of because I don't
Yeah,
need to, I don't need to do any of that. And there's a creek and all this, but then there's just a ton of geese. And we have a big dog, and then he goes out, walks through all the goose droppings, and brings it back in the house, which I hate, right? So I'm trying to get the geese away.
yeah,
And I have found, I don't know if you knew this, but I have found that a green laser pen or pen light really works well to
really.
to move geese along. Yeah. Yeah, it's
That's
awesome.
good. That's good to know. That could be one of our features and benefits.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Oh, trust me, I've gone deep into this rabbit hole because I was buying drones to scare them off. I was doing all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
It's like being the war.
I'm gonna have to try that because we have geese at the house, and same thing. They've got a whole 5 acre lake in the backyard, but for some reason they like coming to the pool and going right next to it, right,
Oh,
and,
awesome.
all over the concrete. So I'm like, I gotta get rid of these geese somehow.
Yeah. Green. From what I understand, the green light works because I read an article about how this is how major golf courses keep geese away, but they had like this laser thing that was like 7 grand. And I was
Yeah,
like, not all right. I hate these geese. They're flying donkeys. They're Canada's worst export, but I don't want to spend 7 grand to,
I'm
flash.
running green laser for geese down because if they're spending 7 grand, maybe there's a big opportunity here.
There you go. There you go. And just, remember me when you make that big sale.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Cody, thank you so much. And folks, this has been Cody Grandadam, the flashlight guy. He the head honcho over at LitezAll. Please go check him out. His story is fascinating. Again, he's really humble, but I don't know if you caught this, but he built a $500 million company, and they're just going to be going way up from there. So, thank you so much for your time, Cody. It was so great. Thank you for sharing your story. And I know everyone really appreciate it. So really appreciate your time as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, PJ. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you.
There you go. Oh, did I? Okay. I think he's off. No,